There we go.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Our Greatest Strength.
My name is Glenn Keller.
And I'm Dimple Shah.
And if you'd like to know what this is about and why we're having these conversations, you could check out the introductory video that we have on our YouTube link.
Okay, so in today's episode, we are going to interview Glenn. And without any further ado, let's get started. May I ask you some questions, Glenn?
Sure.
All right, so the first one, can you share a little bit about your ancestors and their immigration history?
Okay. So I don't know too much about my father's side, but for us, the important parts on my mother's side, and my father, we weren't with him, so we didn't know that much. But on my mother's side, we've been in this country since early 1600s, and we almost everybody, one way or the other, came from France or a French colony. So some people came from the what we today call the Canadian Maritime provinces, and they were, for lack of a better term, kind of ethnically cleansed out of there by the British. And they wound up in Louisiana and became today what's known as Cajun or Creole. And then some other people came directly from France to Louisiana, and then some people came from by one means or another from some French colonies and wound up in Louisiana. But France and Louisiana were certainly the commonality there. And then eventually everybody migrated north, and the base of our family for many years has been New York City.
Awesome. Perfect. Now, tell me, what perceptions did you have of immigrants before you got a chance to really know one? And which ones came true and which ones did not?
Well, I would say most of them didn't come true, because I think most of my perceptions were fairly stereotypical. I mean, it's just being honest with you. Growing up in New York City, everybody likes to call it a melting pot. I would think it's basically a bunch of people in the same pot, but I'm not sure how we melted together really all that much, because people tended to head into very stereotypical directions. So my aunt married a man of strong German ancestry. He owned a butcher shop, right? So it's like that was the German thing. And we had a pizza place down the street, surprise, run by an Italian family. And one of the worst stereotypes we've heard is the Chinese laundry and the Chinese restaurant. But growing up, the little girl next door and I were best friends for a time, and her family ran a laundry. So it's like you take those and you look at those small pieces, especially as a child, and you blow those up. And so those were like my first impressions, my first stereotypes, that people from other countries came here to do a certain job. And there certainly wasn't any bigotry or prejudice against them. It was just like, this is what we're going to do. And if you call the police, somebody with an Irish accent is going to show up. Same with the fire. And darned if the guys at the firehouse down the block did not have Irish sounding names. So that was kind of it. And those turned into stereotypes that sometimes it takes a while to overcome, honestly.
Yeah. Did you have any friends who were engineers or doctors or origin?
Well, okay, to be fair, we were not in a situation where we had many friends that would have been engineers or doctors. We just weren't that kind of family, and we didn't live in those kinds of neighborhoods. Although one of my cousins became a judge, but in that time and when I was growing up, no, I didn't know any immigrants like that, but I didn't know anybody else like that either, except literally our doctor.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Perfect. Wonderful. So tell me, what was your biggest culture shock as an American at the receiving end when you were around an immigrant?
Oh, well, first of all, the stereotypes, they completely fall away. But I started working. I work for a global company. We started working on a regular basis with people from different countries. I grew up. Most of my friends were Cuban Americans. Some were Puerto Ricans, and that's just who we grew up with. And the Cuban Americans had fled. They had fled their country, and they immediately came here and started it was mostly upper middle class people that started rebuilding their wealth when they came here. And I think for me the biggest shock was just how dedicated and how hard these people worked. And it was like, okay, we were accomplished and all these other things, and intelligent and smart and driven, where we came from and whatever country you immigrated from, and there may be some shock, there may be some climbing to do, but we're the same type of person here, right? It's just we're in a different country, in a different environment. So I guess what I had to learn a little bit was just, hey, how hardworking, right? How smart, how driven, like some immigrants were.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So now tell me, with globalization rising exponentially all around the world, right? Do you feel like you've lost any opportunities because of an immigrant coming into your country or in your way?
No. I honestly don't think I have lost some opportunities. I have seen some companies, entities, individuals that have abused like visa systems, and where you're driving to the bottom for the lowest dollar. And you wound up with the quote unquote people that are the people that are some people are going to be left aside, right? With globalization, that was always the big thing that we heard. Big opportunity for most people, but some people might be left behind or might be disadvantaged. But it seemed that all those people that left behind and disadvantaged tended to be the lower end of the income spectrum, right? So things got offshored, which was great for people offshore for a while, but it never really affected me personally.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. So now, what can you do, or what did you do as an ally to make an immigrant feel welcomed into your world?
Well, it's funny because we talked about a few minutes ago. We talked about most of the people I've been associated with that have immigrated are extremely smart. They're driven. They're strong people. So it's not like they need a lot of help, right? It's more like they just want to be seen and heard, right? They want to be acknowledged for their skills, their talents, what they're able to do. So I think, to me, the biggest thing, especially if you're in a leadership position somewhere, is, hey, make sure you listen. And that sometimes it's all that it takes, and to acknowledge that, hey, your value. I like telling people, I'm glad you're here, right? Because you're contributing, and that seems to mean a lot to people. When you say something like that, just acknowledge that they're here and say, hey, I'm glad you're contributing.
Great segue into my next question on how do you as a leader support diversity in your organization?
I think the first thing you need to think about is being intentional, right? So it's one thing, to talk about it or do a podcast about it or even to talk about it here, but I think it comes in your actions and being intentional about making sure where you have influence or opportunity or even control, if understanding that you may have to do a little bit more to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity. You might have to step out of your box a little bit. I love, one of my favorite memories of working with global teams is when I get an email or a text, or just a random LinkedIn message from somebody from a country like Russia that says, "Hey, I want to thank you for the opportunity for letting me lead a global project. That was really great." Or it's like an employee from China who was just kind of this just really fun, crazy person that said, "Hey, we had a lot of fun working together, didn't we?" And so those are things that mean a lot to me. And Hungarians that told me, "Hey, we appreciate the faith you had in our Hungarian staff when you were here. So, to me, that's the most valuable thing. And that comes from just acknowledging people and listening to them and giving them opportunities because you're being intentional.
Well, you already hinted a little bit in what you said right now, but as an ally for immigrants, what would you advise an aspiring ally?
Oh, I think the big so I think the biggest thing is to listen. And then maybe the second biggest thing is just get out of the way, right? So it's like, if I think people have the same amount of drive and the same where there's maybe cultural differences, but people they all want to provide for their family. They all want opportunity, and so what they're looking for is they're looking for the opportunity to build that opportunity. They want to be heard. They want a place at the table. They want the same type of opportunities that everyone else has. And sometimes it's a little bit as just, hey, saying, I'm glad you're here, or getting out of the way. And sometimes it's like just, helping them solve a problem. Like I worked with one employee once who really didn't understand the U.S. banking system, right? And I said, you're probably talking to the wrong person, right? Because I don't like balancing my checkbook, but we found somebody who was able to help him and went to the bank with him. And then after that, of course, next thing we knew, he owned a house and was building wealth and all that. So it's like that was just his little thing he had to overcome, this little hurdle.
Wonderful. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so my next question for you is, what is that one thing that you wished immigrants would know coming into this country?
Bring your wallet. Well, that's it is a funny way of saying it, but this is something I've heard pretty consistently. And I remember a Mexican friend of mine said, hey, Glenn, I love it here. You got all kinds of, you can be whatever you want to be. The government doesn't get in your way. You can build wealth. I've built a great career. My kids are going to have great careers. He said, but you know what? You have to pay for everything. Nothing's free, right? So, healthcare isn't free. You got a tip. You pay taxes on taxes. And it's, I think that's like, just be prepared for that. It's like, it's a land of opportunity, but not necessarily a land of milk and honey, right? So it's not free, right? People talk about working hard, and I think they get that. But I think, the one thing I've heard people be surprised at is, hey, yeah, you can make more money here, but you're also shelling out a lot more.
True that. Okay, well, so in your opinion, how has this country changed over years with respect to working around or working with immigrants?
Frankly, to be honest, I think as a whole, we've become more aware and we've become more tolerant as a whole. And, we do not put institutional barriers in place as much. To get for certain people, like we don't try to force Chinese Americans into doing certain types of labor, for example. But from a hearts and minds perspective, I don't think, frankly, it's changed that much. I saw a lot of ignorance about immigrants from certain countries when I was growing up. And I think, percentage-wise, I think it's probably less today. We are more accepted, but it's still there. It's still there. So I think, and maybe that's just part of the human condition that we as humans need to get over. But I see that there's still a lot of stereotyping. So have we changed for the better in that regard? Yeah, I think so. But, it's not this landslide shift. There's still a lot of, fear and the bias and prejudice that comes with fear going on. So, but I do see an upward curve for the better.
Good. Hopeful for a great future. What have you learned about immigrants you wished more people knew?
Well, I, you know, I think the biggest thing is just how smart and how driven immigrants are. Because I mean, to come here from somewhere else takes just a tremendous amount of energy and effort. So you had to have a lot of drive to get here in the first place. And I mean, I don't care how you got here. You know, some people come on an airplane, some people come on foot, some people come with a very easy visa process, some people come with a really hard visa process. But to go through all that, you know, you've got to have some drive and energy, and that's yeah, that's one of the things. That's one of the things I've found.
Oh, well, love the answer. Well, I think that's all the questions I had for you, Glenn, but I do want to ask, what has not been asked yet that you would like to share? Anything that I missed out, but anything you feel strongly about wanting to share?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a question, but I mean, I think for me, having worked at a global company for 18 years and been given the opportunity to travel and lead global teams and work with people on projects from all over the world and go on weekend trips with them in their countries and visit their families and then having the same thing in return here. I mean, I think I'd be a different person if I had been that and had gone through that. And so it's funny, you find out, what the cultural differences are when you talk to people from other countries, but you also find, the similarities, like the jokes may be different, for instance, but they're at the end they're all the same,
sure.
Right? And people want the same thing for their families. Everybody. That's what I find in common. I had people from countries that you wouldn't think would get along together, getting along together on teams very well because they had a common goal, and the common goal is, hey, we're here to work, we're here to take care of our families, and we're going to do whatever that takes.
Wonderful. Well, it's always fun chatting with you, Glenn. Thank you for your candid answers.
Yeah, and I appreciate your questions.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Thank you all for tuning in. Do send us feedback, comments, questions, references. See you in the next episode.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.